Hey, hey, hey. Welcome to the fourth episode of Tea with Tea. I'm your host, Therese, as always, joined in part by my little co host, Xander. Today, we're going to touch on pregnancy and early motherhood because that's something that I've kind of been chit chatting a lot with friends recently, and I figured we might as well just kind of get it down and share it with everyone. Now, I am a recent mother of two. I was originally just a mother of one, Charlie Bear, and he just turned 5 in January. So I was pretty young when I had Charlie, not like MTV Teen Mom style young, but I definitely did not have any ducks in order before he came. Eric and I weren't even really together all that long before we got pregnant with Charlie. So we really kind of took a gamble, and I feel like it paid off. So becoming pregnant, let's start there. It was definitely a shock, and it was very difficult for me. Sorry, cracking my knuckles. So it was very difficult for me to tell my parents and my family at first because I was just completely surprised by the pregnancy. So I knew that it would be even more surprising to them. And, also my mom, bless her, she's Filipino Roman Catholic, so just about as devout as they come. So, she was one of the people I was most nervous to tell because she's so religious. But I mean, she and my dad completely took it in stride. My dad was so blasé about it that I was almost upset. I almost felt cheated. Like I was so convinced it was going to be this huge to do that when they were like, okay, well, are you going to come eat lunch about it? I was just like hurt and shocked and really surprised. And then we went over and we told my aunt next because my family's very close. My mom and my aunt are the only siblings of theirs who are in the States. Everyone else is in the Philippines. So, my aunt is very close to me. And at the time, my cousin Desi and I were very close, and we were living together as roommates. So she definitely was told. And once we told everyone, like, okay, that's the first step out of the way. Cool. Now we can kind of figure out what we're doing with this baby. I did not know I was pregnant at first. I wasn't very nauseous. I was just tired all the time. And at the time I was a nanny. So I was easily napping 10 hours a day. Yeah, 10 hours a day, because then I would, wake up, take the girls to school, go home, nap, wake up, eat something, go back to a nap, wake up, pick the girls up from school, nap while they did their homework, check their homework, made them dinner, napped. Their parents came home, I went home, napped, ate dinner with Eric, hung out with him, and then went to bed. And then Eric pointed out that that's not exactly normal. So he was like, we should get you checked out by a doctor, or when's your period? Are you pregnant? And I just kept brushing him off like, no, I'm just tired. It's like the flu season or whatever. Because around then I started to get sick. And we took a pregnancy test, and it was like one of those line ones. So the line was wibbly. Something was inconclusive about it. So we're like, okay, well then we'll just get a digital one. That way we know for sure one way or another. And we took one and went to see a doctor after it was positive. And the doctor was like, yeah, you're actually pretty far along. I was just about out of the first trimester. And it was then that my body was like, oh, we're pregnant. Okay, well, we've got a lot of catching up to do. And I was so sick for the next couple weeks. The wind blew a different way, like the wind changed directions once, and that made me throw up. So I was throwing up, and then I'd have to, I threw up in our bathroom once, and I read somewhere like, oh, if you put coffee on vomit, then it'll dry it up, and then it'll be easier to pick it up, and it'll get rid of the smell. Problem was, then the smell of coffee was so strong in that bathroom that it made me throw up again. So that was struggle city for me. But thankfully, that only lasted a couple weeks. At the time, it felt like it was ages. But in retrospect, it was only a handful of weeks. And then we were out of that nausea cycle and this was probably the highlight of my pregnancy, where I wasn't too big, but I was starting to show, and I could feel him moving, and it was almost the time where Eric could feel him moving. I was talking to the baby all the time. My appetite was starting to pick up, make up for the weeks where I couldn't keep anything down. And then it was like I blinked, and then suddenly I was huge. Charlie wound up being born 10 pounds, so you can imagine. I'm like 5'9" and a half. I'm big. I'm sturdy. I'm a sturdy girl. So it was almost like I just stuck a beach ball under my dress. That's how my belly was. I will try and attach a picture or a link to a picture in the show notes so we can really get an idea of how big I was just before the end. So the pregnancy went really quickly. I gave birth. Now, the story of the birth is a kind of funny one. It's one of my favorite ones to tell. So I was on bed rest because my blood pressure was crazy high the week before I delivered. And I was on bed rest, so I wasn't really leaving the house much. I was really just kind of like laying in one room, getting up to go to the kitchen to get a drink, and then I'd lay down in the living room. And I was getting cabin fever because I hated it. I just wanted to go outside. I just wanted to do things. Well, that Sunday morning at 5 a.m, I woke up and I thought I had peed myself. And I was like, great. And towards the end of the pregnancy, you're over it. You're over being pregnant. You're over not seeing your feet. You don't remember the last time you saw your vulva. You are just done. Your feet hurt. Your body's swollen. You're done. You pee a little bit when you sneeze. You're over it. Everyone's like, oh, you look great. No, F that. I just want this baby out. I'm ready. I'm done. I'm over it. So when I thought I peed myself, I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. There's no dignity left. And like I angrily ripped the sheets off and I'm waddling to the bathroom. And I'm like, okay, well, let me just finish peeing. And then I realized like I had finished peeing, but I still heard liquid going into the toilet. And I was like, okay, maybe I don't know my bladder right now. So I just flushed the toilet, went to pull my pants up, and I was like, oh, wait, I'm still like dripping a little bit. So I put a pad in, and I was like, maybe my water broke, maybe not. So I got up, and I started to get my hospital bag together just in case. I kept it packed, but the night before in my house arrest cabin fever, I had a wild hair at my ass to repack the bag because there's so many, I could pack it so much better. But frankly, I was so desperate for any kind of stimulation that wasn't Netflix. Although I did make it like halfway through Supernatural, and that was like they were up to season 9 at the time. So I started from the very first episode and gone through. Anywho, I was repacking the bag, and then I realized like I had soaked with this maxi pad. So I was like, okay, it's official. I am official. My water's broken. We gotta go. And I go to wake up Eric, and keep in mind, this is all happening about 6, almost 7 a.m. Eric had stayed up till 4, shotgunning American Horror Story. So he was shotgunning American Horror Story, so he didn't go to bed till 4. So here I am, 6:30, 7 o'clock, going, hey, my water broke, we need to go. And in his sleep, because Eric is a terrible person to have to wake up on a normal day, he'll snooze literally 3 different alarms 15 times, and it makes me want to smother him. So on this particular morning where my water's broken, we need to go to the hospital, he sleepily rolls over and says to me, well, are you sure? No. I did absolutely no sort of check or preparation before asking you to get up and take me to the hospital. And he was like, okay, let me get ready. And he literally putters around the house for over an hour while I'm getting more and more anxious and angrier. And it gets to the point where I'm finally like, that's it. Give me the keys. I'm leaving without you. You can meet me at the hospital. And Eric's like, whoa. I'm ready. Let's go. And I'm like, get in the car. Because by this time, my water's been steadily dripping for a couple hours. And I was like, I don't know how much fluid's in there. I don't want to like run out and then I have to have a C-section because there's nothing left. And then Eric's like, well, I need coffee. And I was like, okay, good. Well, I need something to eat because once you check into the hospital, when you're in labor, you can't eat anything. You can't drink anything. They only give you ice chips. That was not going to be enough for me. And I knew that going into it. So I was like, okay, take me and I'll eat something there. Well, since I was in the early stages of labor, my contractions were very painful, but they were enough where it was very difficult for me to finish a breakfast sandwich. So I just kind of nibbled at it, gave Eric the rest, and he took me to the hospital. Well, they did a little swab. That's the baby. They did a little swab to make sure that what I was thinking was amniotic fluid really was, because they've had moms say, oh, my water broke, but it wasn't. So they did a little swab to test. The swab said, yes, that was amniotic fluid. So they're like, okay, we're going to check you in. And I described to them the morning leading up to getting there. And they said, okay, well, since you've been kind of dripping for a while, we're going to give you Pitocin to make sure that you don't have a dry birth, which is exactly what I was afraid of when I was back at the apartment. So they give me Pitocin, and I'm ready. I've texted all of our family. Thankfully, it's a Sunday, so everyone can come visit us at the hospital, and I'm thinking, I'm ready. Slowly but surely, everyone in my family starts to pile in. Eric's mom comes up. So there's a ton of people in my room. Well, by now, the Pitocin's really kicked in. Things are starting to escalate. For those of you who don't know, Pitocin is a hormone that they give to women in labor to essentially speed up the labor. So normally, the hills and valleys of labor are, concave and convex. Almost like a bowl shape, slow up, and then slow down. With Pitocin, it's more like, imagine the Eiffel Tower, how it just goes straight up and straight down. That's how it feels. It's very quick. The time between contractions is shorter. It can be very painful. So as things start to go on, my family's still trying to comfort me. My aunt, she's given birth 4 times, so she's trying to rub my hands and rub my head. But every time a contraction starts, when she would rub me, it felt like nails, like needles going into me. And thankfully she understood and she stopped. But then about this time, when things are really starting to pick up speed, bless you, when things are really starting to pick up speed, Eric was like, hey, I haven't eaten anything, so can I go down to Subway downstairs and grab a sandwich? And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I got so angry, and his mom was like, I'll just go. You stay here. And about this time, it's about noon, and my doctor is not available, so her partner was on her way in to deliver me. And the nurses were getting me ready because it was happening. The baby was almost there. And so they get me all ready. My contractions are painful. The doctor literally pokes her head in and goes, I'll be right there, and leaves. This baby's coming. This baby is on the way. And the nurse who was in charge, she took off after that doctor and dragged her in and was yelling at her. She bent her ear about how, I did all the work. The nurse was literally shouting she's doing all the work. All you have to do is be here and catch this damn baby. And she's about to have it without you. Because I was, at this point, Charlie's crowning. I'm ready to just push, but I can't unless the doctor's there. Which, that's something we'll talk about later. And so I give birth. This doctor, hasn't been there for all of my OB appointments. So I was just like, please, Lord, let her not just decide to do an episiotomy. Again, for those of you who don't know what an episiotomy is, that is where the doctor just takes a pair of scissors, essentially, and cuts your taint open. The taint is that muscle wall that separates the vaginal canal from your anus. And they used to cut those fairly often to help, quote unquote, ease birth. They thought it made the opening wider, so it would help. But in recent years, they've established that it's better for mothers to tear because it can heal quicker and it stitches up a little cleaner. So she did not do that, but I did tear because, again, I birthed a 10-pound baby. We didn't know he was 10 pounds. So when the nurses are dealing with the baby and they're saying 10-2, 10-2, I was like, oh my God, is that a code? Am I bleeding out? Is the baby bleeding out? What's happening? And the nurse was she heard me say that and she goes, oh, no. The baby's 10-2, 10 pounds, 2 ounces. I was like, whose baby? And she was like, yours. So the doctor stitched me up. They gave me my little chunk, Charlie Bear, and I held him, and it was so crazy because the moment that they put him in my arms, I was just overcome. I didn't cry. With Charlie, I did not cry until we're leaving the hospital to go home. You know, we buckled him into his little car seat in the back seat of my car. I climbed in the back seat with him. We closed the doors, and Eric starts to drive home. And I cried because I was like, oh my God, this is real. This baby's mine. Like, I guess I thought it, I guess subconsciously I was like, oh yeah, any moment a real adult's going to come take this baby and it'll be fine. No, you're the adult, Therese. You're responsible for this one. But we had, a couple friends and family come and visit. And it was for a first time labor, my whole labor with Charlie, start to finish, not including the time at home after my water broke, was about 3 hours. So I gave birth pretty quickly with him. And with Xander, I went to work that day. On the drive home, on my commute home, a little bit stuck in traffic, I had contractions, but I was like, oh, I've been having contractions for like a week or so now. If they don't get stronger, then I won't bother to time them. But they did start to get stronger. And by the time I got home, like 45 minutes to an hour after setting out from work, they were starting to get a little stronger, a little more painful. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start timing them. Thankfully, Charlie was such a good sport because that night I was like, I can't cook dinner. I just don't feel good. Let's see. With Charlie, that labor moved so quickly, it was really a blur. But with Xander, things happened a little differently, so it's easier for me to keep track. But I remember feeling really anxious and almost sick to my stomach. But then the contractions as they started out getting stronger, really felt like. Hold on. The contractions really felt like a giant had me in his hand, like King Kong style, and was just squeezing. And it would get stronger and stronger. So it was like I was a human stress ball. And by the time Eric got home, I was literally sitting on one of my yoga mats on the floor, just with my legs, I guess, what is that, lotus position? I don't know. But I was sitting on the floor with my feet together, knees akimbo, and really just breathing. And he was like, are you okay? And I said, I think I might be going into labor later this evening. I'll keep you posted. And he was like, okay, well, what's Charlie doing? I was like, Charlie's just eating his rice and chicken. Like, he's fine. I have not eaten because I just can't. And Eric was like, okay, well, why don't you go lay down? And I'll check on you in an hour or so. And I'll take care of Charlie. And I said, thank you. So I went upstairs, laid down, and I tried to catnap. But the contractions, of course, were just getting stronger, getting a little closer together. When they hit about 6.5 minutes, 7 minutes apart, per my timer, I was like, okay, I got to let Eric know. So I grabbed my phone to call Eric, who was downstairs, and I let him know, hey, I am going into labor, so it's time to call people to get Charlie situated. We had a little plan because, we can't take Charlie to a hospital where I'm going to go into labor. If I cry during a movie, it makes Charlie upset. So definitely don't want my poor emotional, empathic son in the delivery room. Plus, also the hospital has a policy of your child can be there, but there has to be another adult to watch him. And since we weren't trying to have a whole bunch of people in the delivery room, we had Eric's mom meet us at the house so she could hang out with Charlie until my brother could come down from Spring to grab him, and he would stay with my folks up in Spring while I was in the hospital. If you give birth, you're going to be in the hospital for a couple days. I've never given a home birth with a midwife, so I don't know how that works out. But just know, if you're going to give birth in a hospital, you're going to be there at least 2 days. If you have a C-section, you'll be longer. Or in my case, if there's complications, my blood pressure was really high, so they kept me for 3 days to observe me. Where was I? Yes. So I'm in the shower trying to just make it through this next set of contractions. And I realize that I'm spotting. So that means my cervix is effaced or it's real thin. So again, my body's getting ready to give birth. I know. I'm telling the story of you, bud. So Eric helps me get dressed. I've got my hospital bags all packed. So he just puts them in the truck. His mom gets there and she tries to tell me good luck. She's trying to wish me well, but she literally came right in the middle of a contraction, so all I could do was grimace at her because my contractions were also getting longer. So instead of the minute or so of discomfort they were when I was driving home, they became about 3 minutes of discomfort, 3 minutes of pain almost. So we get to the hospital. And this is a funny thing. When we were driving to the hospital, Eric was like, what do you want to listen to? And there's an XM radio station called Spa or Chill. We tried to listen to Spa, and I was like, this is not calming me at all. Put Chill on. And the Chill station's helping me kind of relax. And we called some of our friends, and we're like, hey, we're going to the hospital. And they were getting ready to meet us. But again, some people will want to be there with you for your labor. You definitely need to check with your hospital on how many visitors are allowed in labor and delivery versus how many visitors are allowed in postpartum. I didn't know how long my labor was going to be. My labor with Charlie was 3 hours, but my cousin, her labor was 28 hours. My mom's was 17 hours. I didn't want a bunch of people stuck watching me for ages. So we told them, don't worry about it. We'll just let you know when the baby's here and you can come visit whenever. So then we go. And as we're getting ready to pull into the parking lot, the Chill station starts playing a song called Alexander. And at the time, we were just like, ooh, that's so spooky. And Eric was like, I think that's a sign. You're going to have the baby tonight. Keep in mind, it's 9, almost 10 p.m. And we're just pulling up to the hospital. So I was like, okay, well, we'll see. I know, darling. I know. You can tell the story later, okay? Mm-hmm. Well, so our hospital had free valet. So really we just pulled up to the curb and left the keys in it and we just dashed in. We checked in, went up to labor and delivery. And of course, Eric has to do most of the talking because by now walking is pretty uncomfortable. It's pretty painful. And I have to focus all my attention on staying upright and reminding myself to breathe, that I can hardly tell them, oh, we're obviously in labor. What do we do? What room do we check into? And we had done our hospital tour the week beforehand. So luckily, Eric at least knew where to go, which was very helpful. And then when we get there, the labor nurse is doing her usual questions and all that. And then she is like, okay, well, and I said, hey, when can you call the doctor? Because I think that it's going to happen pretty soon. And the nurse was like, well, let me check. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. And she's putting a glove on and taking her time. And when they say we need to check, or they need to check if you're effaced, that pretty much means that they're going to put a gloved hand in your vagina to feel your cervix. I just need to put that out there because some people don't realize what that means. It's not like they can just look at you. They have to feel your cervix to see how far along you are, how dilated, how open you are, how effaced your cervix is, how thin it is. And as soon as she put her hand in me, she was like, oh goodness, yeah, you're ready to go. So then her tone completely changes, and now she's like, okay, now it's business. It's no longer, oh well, let me just humor you. Now it's oh, she was right. This is happening. So she gives me my clothes to change into. She gives a couple forms to Eric to fill out. And she said, do whatever you need to be comfortable. If you need to walk around, if you need to get in the shower, what have you, just you get comfortable while we wait for the doctor and wait for you to finish. Because I think I was about 7 centimeters dilated. I will also in the show notes link to a picture with food that shows just how big dilation is, so that everyone's kind of on the same page. Because I know that in America, we don't use the metric system. So when someone says to me, X amount of centimeters, I don't know what that is. We're imperial up here. Imperial in this bitch. So let's see. I am in labor. I'm spotting pretty good. I am breathing. I'm walking around. And it hurt less if I was sitting straight up or standing. But then they took my blood pressure and it was a little high. So then they confined me to the bed, which made me very uncomfortable simply because, like I said, moving around or standing or sitting straight up helped a lot with the pain versus laying down. So whenever a contraction came, I just had to sit up in the bed. I cranked that bed as vertical as I could, support-wise for like sitting up, but it still wasn't enough. And I still remember there was a Food Network kind of travel food thing for like Asian countries. I still remember this. And it was a special about a hot pot, like Szechuan hot pot. And I remember watching it and being like really interested. And then my pain started to get to the point where I couldn't focus on anything. And I was asking the nurse, where's the doctor? Well, once again, my doctor was unavailable. So her partner came to deliver me. This was a different OB from my first pregnancy to my second one. But her partner was still great. And at least this partner I had seen a few times, unlike the partner who delivered Charlie. So this partner, at least I kind of knew of. You know, she was like, has the water broken? It hadn't yet, but she could feel that I was moving quickly along. She said, okay, let me just get your test results, because before you give birth, they check to make sure that you don't have a certain kind of bacteria or virus in you. Because if you do, then they have to give you antibiotics before your water breaks and before delivery. So she's like, let me grab those results really quick. I don't remember what the test is called. Sorry. I will Google it and put it in the show notes. But she dashed off to get those results. And as soon as she left the room, my water broke. Thankfully, my results were negative, so we didn't have to worry. But, you know, as soon as she came back, I remember when the water broke, it was like, you know, it was mid-contraction. I was in a lot of pain. And again, it felt like I was being squished by a giant. And it was like I held a water balloon in my lap, and it just burst. You know, when you hold a balloon and you feel a water balloon burst, it was like that, but inside me. Yeah, so my water broke, and the doctor came in and she's like, okay, well, let's move quickly because your contractions are getting pretty painful, and it looks like you're about ready. And by this point, bless you, I could not push. The nurse kept having to be stern with me, and Eric kept trying to remind me, breathe, don't push. But my body, I was physically unable to not push. So the doctor, of course, she's like, Therese, stop pushing. Just let me get my boots on. You know, she's got a nurse helping her get dressed. She's got another nurse getting a table's worth of tools ready. Like, they had been prepping throughout my labor, but now that it was happening, they had to make sure everything that she needed was in arm's reach, because they have to move quickly once things start. Like, once the show begins, they got to move pretty quickly. So they're all yelling at me to not push. And I was in so much. Oh, before we get to this point, after my water burst and the doctor was trying to get ready, I was in so much pain. I literally turned to Eric and I said, I want the epidural. And I didn't have an epidural with Charlie, and that birth was extremely painful, just because of the contractions on Pitocin. And this time I was like, Eric, I want the epidural. And he was like, oh, well, I don't know if we can do that. Let's ask the nurse and see. And then the nurse comes in and I say, hey, can I get the epidural? And she went, oh no, honey, that's not possible. The baby's here. And I was like, oh, okay, well, if the baby's here, because again, minutes feel like hours. I kept checking the clock and thinking, like, that can't be right. The clock must have stopped. That's not the time. Because it felt like I had been in labor for hours, because it's all about perspective. When you're in pain, minutes stretch. Time, you enter slow time. Slow time, it feels like 3 hours, but it's only been 15 minutes. Slow time traditionally happens like before coffee, or when you're stuck in a meeting, or when you're when you're looking towards something, like, oh, it's almost the end of the day on Friday. That's traditionally when slow time comes into play. So When she told me that the baby was almost here, I was like, okay, then I can suffer through. I'll struggle. Let's just do this. Okay, so now fast forward to the doctor's getting her boots on. Everyone in this room is shouting at me not to push, and I literally shout back, I cannot not push. So finally they're like, okay, let's get her in the stirrups. I did not have to go into stirrups for the first for the first delivery. So Eric paused for a second. He's like, is that what you want, Therese? Do you want to do something else? And I was like, I literally said to him, I don't care as long as I can get the baby out. So they put me in the stirrups. I tried to push the first time because you have to push with your contraction because then you're working with your muscles. And I went to push. And for the first birth, I don't remember what it's like a scream therapy. Like you scream through the pain to help you focus. But this time around, she was like, don't scream, hold your breath and push. Instead of screaming, push, just focus everything. So then on my second push, I did that and out comes the baby. Now, like I was saying, that the contractions feel like a giant is squeezing you just to squish you like a bug. Well, once the baby crowned, it was almost like an immediate release of pressure. It was like I was trying to squeeze through a tunnel and I kept getting stuck. But the moment he crowned, all the pressure released, the pain subsided. And then that's when like your adrenaline and everything kicks in. And that's when like fast time kicks in. So, it felt like between one breath and the next, the baby's completely out. Eric's cutting the umbilical cord, and then she's stitching me. It was like between one breath and the next, all that stuff's happening. Then Eric's with the baby on one side of the room. He's getting measured. He's getting cleaned up. They're doing their APGAR scoring for the baby, and this APGAR, I think it's the APGAR score, is when they rate how the baby's coloring, how the baby's reacting, is the baby breathing. The higher the score, the healthier, I guess, quote unquote, the baby. So while I'm getting stitched up, I tore a little bit because, again, I pushed twice and he was here. So that labor from start to finish was 2 hours, an hour and a half, within 2 hours, because Eric looked at the clock and he's like, we did it. We made it before midnight. So it was like from 9 to 11, I believe, or something like that. It was my labor. And I remember that the last thing I remembered before my labor got too intense on that Hotbot special, that was playing on the screen. So while they're wrapping up with me and the baby and he comes to me for our little skin to skin snuggle time, I just finished watching the Hot Pot special. And I was like, oh, thank you. This is great. And so after you give birth, they will give you the baby to hold for an hour because it helps with the bonding. It helps your milk come in. It helps prompt the flow of all of the bonding hormones that you need and the baby needs. So, we got our tummy time in. We snuggled up. They got all of my things together, and then they prepped a room for me to go. But since my blood pressure was high, and it was high with pre-Charlie and post-Charlie as well, the doctors just said, well, some women, this is just something that happens during pregnancy and during birth and postpartum, and it goes away. They just don't know what it is. So I was like, okay, well, that's fine with me. So I had to go to a special postpartum wing where they could keep a little closer eye on me. And, they monitored us. And since he was born so quickly, Charlie too, they were born so quickly that not all of the bilirubin was pushed out, which is something that's broken down by the liver, I believe. But it causes jaundice if you have too much. So Xander had to go under some lights, whereas Charlie did not have to go under lights. I just had to have a follow-up appointment to test his jaundice levels. But Xander had to go under some lights for a couple hours a day. And really, other than that, postpartum is just you taking the time to catnap and bond with your baby. The nurses, if you have any questions, ask the nurses, but you'll have your own set of nurses. The baby will have a set of nurses. And I know. And really, that is it. Pregnancy differences between Charlie and Xander. I got sick with Xander earlier on, almost as though my body knew what to do with all the pregnancy hormones this go around. So it was like, oh, I know what I'm doing with this. I know what to do with this building block. So, while my body was making him from scratch, I was sick earlier and more often. But once it died off, it was perfectly fine. I felt totally normal. I didn't get tired again till the third trimester, when I was getting bigger. But I did not get as big with Xander as I did with Charlie, obviously, because Charlie was born at 10 pounds. I did have coffee more often with Xander simply because I actually liked coffee. I didn't like coffee when I was pregnant with Charlie, so it was easier to not have coffee. But with Xander, I'm already a mom to a 4-year-old. I can't not be there for him just because I'm pregnant, because I don't want him to have any kind of resentment towards his brother for taking attention. So I had coffee. I didn't have like a carafe of coffee a day. I just had a cup a day. Sometimes I had espresso. Sometimes it was just regular coffee. But if I had something really strong, like a Vietnamese coffee, I usually forced myself to split it with someone. Shout out to Nigel for absorbing God knows how much caffeine on my behalf. So then that was really the birth of it. Let's talk about breastfeeding really quickly before we end today. Breastfeeding, I breastfed with both babies. Charlie, I breastfed till he was 18 months. And Xander is 3 months going strong. It's kind of strange because almost like during that tummy time, right after birth, one of the things that they try to encourage you to do is try to get them to latch on. Luckily, neither of my babies had tied tongues, so the latch was pretty easy. They both latched on really well. And not to brag about it, but I have been complimented, and I quote, have great nursing nipples, end quote. Pretty much they just are wide. They're wide. So that gives the baby more surface area to latch onto. And when you breastfeed, this is something that a lot of people mistake. You don't just give them the tip. They have to also, they latch on clear to the areola and they milk from back there. It's not just, because it will hurt you if they just get just the nipple and they try and suckle, because it'll pull. You don't want that. You just want gentle suction. And you'll feel it. Oh, it's a strange feeling when your milk comes in and you feel a letdown. It's almost like a tingly prickly down the sides of your breasts. But you'll learn to feel that feeling and be like, okay, great. That's what I'm looking for when I'm nursing. When they first start nursing, the first couple days, this is a common misconception. Babies do not need a whole lot of liquids in the beginning of their lives. In the show notes, I'll be sure to link to a picture of how big a baby's belly is before they, as they develop, because the first couple days, you'll literally just have a little teeny tiny bit. And that's because their stomach is tiny, like a thimble. And then by the time they hit a month, I think their belly is like an egg or something. It's very small. So some people get discouraged because, they're trying to pump or they're trying to do X, Y, or Z to get more milk, when in actuality, the baby can't drink all that. Your supply will grow with the baby to suit their needs. So do not get any milk testing kits or start pumping too soon to compare how much you're making. You're making exactly how much you would need to make based on the age of your baby. And I did what's called nursing on demand. I didn't try to schedule him right away. I just, whenever he's hungry, I fed him. I try to feed him, let him nurse 15, 20 minutes on each side, especially in the beginning, because then that trains him. This is what you do when you're here. And it trains your body. When you feel this is how you know to make milk. And that's helped my supply. Sometimes they will cluster nurse. And what cluster nursing is where it almost feels like as soon as you take them off, it feels like as soon as you take them off the nipple that they're hungry again. So you can easily feel discouraged, like, am I not making anything? What's happening? But really, cluster nursings or cluster feedings happen, because they're approaching a growth spurt, or they just need a little more snuggling from you, or really that it's just in their instinct to help you make more milk. So if you're cluster feeding, just make sure you're alternating sides, that you're doing it for at least 15 minutes, because that gets you both in the habit of getting the foremilk and the hind milk. Again, that's something we'll dive deeper into breastfeeding a little later. I still want to stick to early life, early motherhood. So cluster feedings will happen on occasion, and that's just normal. Charlie's 5, and I can tell whenever he's approaching another growth spurt, because he even cluster feeds. It's like he just keeps eating, and that's fine as long as he's eating good food and he's eating all of it. He's not just like, oh, I'm full, because he doesn't want to eat his carrots and he wants junk food instead. No, he's eating everything I give him each time. Then I'll continue to give him food. That's fine, because he'll do it for a week or so, and then he'll be back to normal. Poops. So the first couple poops from your baby will be almost like a tar. It'll be thick and goopy and black, and that's called meconium. That's totally normal. Don't think that your baby is like a demon or something. So that poop will be black, almost tar-like, and that's totally normal, because that's everything that they swallowed while they were in the amniotic sac, still in the womb, and that's just that stuff exiting. Breastfed or formula fed, their poop should change consistency by the time you go home and stay pretty seedy and light colored. Again, you'll have a doctor's appointment almost immediately after you get home for the baby, and you can ask your pediatrician. You can ask your pediatrician any other lingering poop questions you have. Self-care. So self-care as a new mom is super important, because it's very easy to lose yourself in taking care of the baby or trying to make a new schedule or pattern for your new little family. But it's still very important for you to have self-care. So if you're tired, you've got to find time to lay down and sleep, preferably without the baby, because you'll be sleeping so lightly waiting for something to happen with the baby that you won't be able to rest. So have a friend come by, have your mom come by, have someone come by and hang out with the baby for an hour or so that you can just sleep. Because that's so important. You need to sleep so that you have energy for the baby. Make sure you're eating. The baby's got a lot of opinions on this. So one good rule of thumb that I follow is that every time I feed the baby, I eat something and drink a glass of water. Especially if you're breastfeeding, you need the extra calories and the extra water, because the baby will continue to leach some off of you. So it's very important that you're eating enough and you're drinking enough and you're sleeping enough. So self-care as a new mom is still very important. You can't get... you can get a massage, I think, but it's not recommended, because massages, they push toxins and lactic acid and stuff into your blood, and that's why you drink that's why every time you get a massage, they recommend you drink a lot of water to help flush all that stuff out. And you run the risk of that stuff ending up in your breast milk. So that's one thing where I was always told, don't get massages, especially when you're in the beginning stages of breastfeeding, because again, that'll end up in your breast milk. But if you absolutely need one, just make sure that you drink a lot of water and you time it so that the baby isn't needing to be fed right after. Let's see what else. Get lots of snuggle time with your baby. Skin-to-skin contact is so important, especially in the first couple months. You'll want to snuggle up skin-to-skin. You'll want to snuggle up skin-to-skin every chance you can get, just because they're cute and cuddly and so soft and snuggly. But also, again, all those bonding hormones that your body churns out when that happens is so good and so important. I did not have very bad postpartum with either baby. With Xander, I did have some depression during my pregnancy. It was very important to Eric and I that I had open communication with him about how I was feeling all the time, because I did not want a little bit of baby blues to evolve into anything permanent. So whenever I was feeling very depressed, I talked with Eric about it, and that helped him recognize the signs of my depression, or as they related to the baby. So it's very important that you get snuggles in, you get sunlight, and that you talk with your partner or your support people, because it's very easy when you're awash with hormones for you to wind up depressed, or for something small to escalate. As an emotional as fuck person, it is so easy for me to spiral sometimes. I know. Like, I'll be upset about one thing, and then somehow I've morphed it into 15 things, and the train has just run away on the tracks. So it's very important that your support system be prepared to help you with that. Also, side note, if you are ever tapped to be someone's support system, please take it seriously. If you cannot be objective and be there for them when they need it and be constructive, just be genuine and say, listen, I don't think I can support you properly in this position. I would love to do that for you, but I do feel like I can't give you what you need, so I don't want to do a poor job. Being honest is so much better than just saying yes for, bragging rights. Because if you're not going to do it for the person you're supporting, then why are you doing it, period? To be able to say that someone trusts you and wants to rely on you, then you're not supporting them. You're just doing this for bragging rights, and you're being a bit of an asshole if that's the case. If you're going to be someone's support system, you are there for them, not for you. Take it seriously, especially if they're a new mom or pregnant or anything. Actually, if someone is vulnerable enough to come to you and say, I need your help, I need your support, you be a trooper about it, or you politely beg off. Because if you have someone relying on you and you just decide, oh, well, I don't feel like it anymore, then you're a dick. They are coming to you for help. Do you know how hard it is to ask for help? It's so incredibly difficult. So if they're asking for help and you spit in their face at it, like, all that does is create more issues, because now they're going to be afraid to ask other people for help, because they're going to think that they'll always be met with that kind of reaction. And we don't need that kind of negativity. It's 2018. Support and love your people, or else get out of their lives and make space for people who will. I know. So, your assignment this week, guys, at the end of this very long and twisty road, your assignment this week is to support someone. Whether they ask for it or not, you can even volunteer, say, hey, I know that you're undertaking this project and I want to support you. You let me know how I can help you. Or if you are someone's support system, just check in on them, because sometimes I know that I, in the past, have a habit of not reaching out to my support system because I worry that they're busy, or I don't want to overload them, or I don't want to seem just like a needy, clingy person. Just reach out, check on the people who you support, or start to support someone new. Everyone could use a little more love and guidance, and everyone needs a cheerleader. So support someone, and we will see you next week. Remember, all of our social media will be in the show notes. Feel free to follow and engage with us on there. Also, feel free to buy us a tea. That link will be in the show notes as well. Buying a tea helps support this little show that we're doing. Lord knows editing and recording takes up a lot of time. And I will reward you with pictures of Xander. So we'll see you guys next week. Have a great one.